As I read each chapter of this book, I'm inclined to think this material is exactly what's needed in our current context. Reading chapter 10, I might have to double down on that. This chapter, we deal with the complementary virtues of open-mindedness and firmness. When it comes to the former, a quick G.K. Chesterton quote comes to mind. Here's a paraphrase. The purpose of an open mind, like an open mouth, is to close on something nourishing. If I never open my mouth, I'll never be able to take in nourishment. I'll die. If I have my mouth open all the time, never closing on anything, I'll miss out on nourishment and likely get some unwanted things down my throat. I say this as I think back to yesterday's walk through the woods. Perhaps you can imagine such an experience. What's the purpose of having an open mind? What's the purpose of holding firmly to what we take ourselves to know? At a basic level, these questions touch on all aspects of the intellectual virtues. We're asking in regard to each of the virtues, how does this virtue increase our access to truth, knowledge, and understanding? Coming from the other side, we would ask the corresponding vices, cases in which we have an excess or a deficiency of the quality in view. How does this vice impair, impede, or distort our access to truth, to knowledge, and to understanding? We make proper judgments about virtues and vices in terms of the ends we have in mind. One thing I don't see King mentioning is that our quest for truth, knowledge, and understanding is normally relative to a particular social setting. What counts as appropriate open-mindedness and appropriate firmness is relative not merely to a universal quest for truth, knowledge, and understanding, but is also relative to the social groups and activities, or to use a Wittgensteinian phrase, the forms of life in which we are acting. The acquisition of truth, knowledge, and understanding is important in every social setting, but the ends to which truth, knowledge, and understanding function as means are peculiar to that setting. In very few social contexts are we merely seeking truth, knowledge, and understanding for their own sake. We are seeking them so we can do the things that constitute the forms of life associated with that social group. King connects open-mindedness with taking possibilities seriously. In general, taking possibilities seriously, taking proposals that strike us as new, that can be very helpful. But consider the social setting we call baseball. Open-mindedness in relation to the playing of baseball has limitations if we are going to keep playing baseball. Some things are ruled out from the very beginning, since considering their inclusion would constitute doing something other than baseball. Now, it might be that playing baseball right now is not appropriate, perhaps because it's raining outside, or we're in a cafeteria, or we only have 3 people. If we are playing baseball, supposing we have enough to field teams and the playing conditions are good, should we be open-minded about the proposal that the batter should be allowed to catch the pitch and throw the ball as an action that would count as equivalent to a hit? Is that being open-minded, or is that doing something other than baseball? Would we consider a person closed-minded if she refused to consider switching to use of a golf ball or a ping pong ball for playing baseball? What about for unwillingness to entertain shifting to 30 innings for a standard game? In what ways are the rules regarding the use of a particular kind of ball, like and unlike those regarding the length of the game, different from each other in constituting the game of baseball? Starting on page 201, King identifies a few things open-mindedness is not. The first quality, he says, is not the same as, is neutrality. This almost gets to my point on social location. Neutrality will sometimes accompany open-mindedness, but it's not the same thing. And neutrality is not required for open-mindedness. What are some of the reasons King gives for discounting neutrality in this context? He offers another practice that he decides is not the same as open-mindedness, a willingness to consider evidence. The problem with practice is not that it's not associated with open-mindedness, but that it's also associated with other intellectual virtues. So it doesn't specifically identify open-mindedness. Beginning on page 204, King works from a book by Jason Behr and suggests 4 characteristics of the open-minded person. These are, first, we are willing and able to transcend our default perspective on an issue. There are many issues that we haven't given thought to or haven't come to a conclusion on. When we are open-minded, we are able to recognize our perspective and at least temporarily set it aside. It might be that we will retain it after our examination of other possibilities, but we are open to considering other options. Consider the weaknesses of both willing Will and able Abe in King's discussion. Number 2, Behr and King call the second practice transcendence. King writes, transcendence is a willing ability to take seriously the merits of alternative views. This kind of transcendence is perfectly compatible with our continuing to hold our beliefs. To transcend our perspective, we need not give up that perspective. We need not become wishy-washy or dial back our beliefs so that we're not confident in them. We don't have to give up our beliefs in order to take other ideas seriously. Indeed, the project of transcending our perspective is mainly focused not on our own beliefs, but rather on understanding of others' beliefs. We can consider views other than our own in order to understand them better or to clear away our misconceptions. Number 3, King's third point is Behr's fourth point, that we recognize the distinctiveness of the other perspective. Learning to see it in its own terms and not merely in terms of our own beliefs, positions, or convictions is necessary. We can recognize there are possible conflicts with our own position and tolerate consideration of the viewpoint nonetheless. Finally, being virtuously open-minded means that we keep the end firmly in mind. We are aimed toward truth, knowledge, and understanding. To this end, we will often try to learn to think like other people. Have you ever heard of a Turing test? In its original context, a Turing test was designed to tell the difference between a human and an artificial intelligence. By engaging in a conversation with the unseen other, the Turing test would tell us which we are engaging with. In recent years, some have developed the idea of an ideological Turing test. Passing such a test would mean that one could represent the beliefs and positions of another in such a way that others could not tell the difference between the one speaking of those beliefs and one who truly espoused them. Consider the current divide in our culture between those we might call political progressives and political conservatives. These two ideologies have very different convictions in some areas. If I am a member of one of these ideological tribes, I could demonstrate understanding of the other tribe in such a way that my description of their positions and why they hold them would be indistinguishable from one who actually held them. On page 206, King discusses a serious impediment to virtuous open-mindedness, the echo chamber. We are less likely to achieve this virtue if we limit ourselves to taking in information from and talking only with those who agree with us. When we shelter ourselves in this way, virtuous open-mindedness becomes much more difficult. In an echo chamber, not only do we become intellectually stunted, exposed only to our own information and reasoning, but our emotional attachment to the absolute rightness of our team is increased. At the bottom of page 209, we see a table positioning the virtue of open-mindedness against its vices. The accompanying vice of deficiency can be named as a simple opposite, closed-mindedness. The accompanying vice of excess is indiscriminateness. We're open to everything, even things we ought to be closed to. King finally turns to firmness, the complementary virtue on page 212. He writes, whereas open-mindedness concerns transcending our own perspective, intellectual firmness concerns maintaining it. Open-mindedness enables us to take seriously the merits of other ideas, while firmness enables us to hold fast to those of our beliefs that are true and well supported. Both are important. Without a willing ability to consider new ideas, we're largely stuck with the beliefs we currently have, even if they're false. Without a disposition to hang on to our credible beliefs, we'll too easily give up beliefs that are true. Can you think of areas in your life, or roles you occupy, or social groups of which you are a part, where firmness is important? What about the profession you are in or headed toward? Do you know enough about the discipline yet to know some ways in which firmness will be important, maybe even essential? King gives an example from astronomy. Newton's theories fit well with observed planetary motion. Well, except for a wobble in the orbit of Uranus. As astronomers tracked it, they observed that it didn't move exactly as Newton's theory said it should. Note, Uranus was discovered about 80 years after Newton proposed his theories, and over 50 years after he had died. Astronomers could have decided at that point that Newton's theories must have been wrong. At least some didn't do that. They theorized that there must be some unknown body that was influencing the orbit of Uranus. By holding firm to Newton's theories of planetary motion and considering they didn't know everything there was to know, they sought out another explanation. In the 1840s, they discovered the planet we know as Neptune. Holding firmly to Newton's theories in this case guided their search for this eighth planet. We see King's vice and virtue table at the top of 214. Firmness is the median between the excess of rigidity, sometimes expressed as dogmatism, and the deficiency of spinelessness, a willingness to drop our convictions when we receive the merest bit of pushback. Over the next few pages, King notes a similar result, these two apparently opposite vices. They both lead people to ignore evidence.